asked one question more than any other question by far across all platforms, YouTube, Instagram, email, and it has a little bit of a disappointing answer, but I'll get there later on in the video. Hello everyone, welcome to my first Q&A. I know this is a little bit of a different format than usual, but hopefully this will still be interesting for you and enjoyable for you, and I hope you'll join me. So I asked you all to submit some of your questions for me on Instagram and on YouTube, and I will be addressing your questions today, as well as some frequently asked questions that I get on YouTube and Instagram. All right, so getting right into your questions. The question is, I think you said you don't eat off your vintage dishes. What brand/pattern are your everyday dishes? Would you eat off older dishes if a lead test showed they didn't contain lead? So that is a great question. It is true that I really don't eat off of my vintage dishes ever. I mostly use them to hang on my walls, decorate my hutch. I use them under plants as little saucers to catch the water. That goes mostly for transferware and decorated plates. Those contain the most lead. So generally speaking, the more colorful a plate, the more decorated a plate, especially those bright blues and different colors like that, those contain the higher levels of lead. Even sometimes in modern plates, those will contain lead, so you have to be really careful with that. But I suppose if a reliable lead test showed that my vintage plate didn't contain lead, I might consider using it for food. You have to be really careful though. I know some people are comfortable using vintage plates for food, and it's totally a personal comfort level thing, but you want to be careful because especially if you're cutting with a knife or scraping with a metal utensil, little bits of that lead can come off in your food, and really there's no safe level of lead in your body. So you just want to be mindful of that. Things like ironstone though, that don't have any decoration, just like plain white ironstone, those are generally safe. I would use those for food. What we use today for our everyday dishes are just some plain white dishes from Bed Bath & Beyond that we got 10 years ago as a wedding gift. Personally, I like plain white because I think all food looks more appealing on plain white dishes generally. So that's what we use. They're starting to get a little bit worn. We've lost a few of them. A few of them are getting little chips around the edges. So that's another thing. If you have a plate that has crazing or chips in the area that the food is going to go in, you do not want to use that for your food any longer because that is a place for bacteria to grow. So, and even the dishwasher, I don't think is going to take that out because it's down in the ceramic. So just something to be mindful of. But to answer the question, we use plain white dishes from Bed Bath & Beyond that are old, and I might eat off a plate that was proven to be lead-free, that was vintage. The next question is also about dishes. Can you put USA Ironstone in the microwave? I'm not entirely positive. I don't see why not, because it doesn't actually contain metal necessarily, so I don't think that would be a risk. But I guess you could try it in small amounts of time and just be careful and see what happens. I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer for that. Let's go on to what is the blue color on the trim by the willow wreath? So that is in our entryway, and it is a Van Courtland blue by Benjamin Moore. Benjamin Moore has a whole historical line of paints, and I just fell in love with that Van Courtland blue color, and that's what's in our entryway. This is a good one. How do you find time to record and edit if you're at home with 4 children? That is a really good question. So the simple answer would be it's very piecemeal. I am not working on YouTube stuff or Instagram stuff every day. Generally, as the week goes by, I do absolutely nothing with it. I only get out a video about once a month, maybe sometimes a little more frequently, but that's because I'm trying to put my full attention toward my house and my children, my family. But when I do decide that I want to record a video or do a project for a video, so usually it's done primarily during nap time, quiet time. Well, for example, I'm recording this while my young toddler is sleeping and my older toddler is having quiet time. So this is the time that I would do projects. The cat is meowing at me to come in, and she just has to be in. She just wants you to see her, I guess. Anyway, so I record in bits and pieces. So generally I will come up with my ideas and my checklist of things that I need to do for a video, a project, whatever. I will make sure I have all my supplies, everything ready to go. And this is in an ideal situation when everything works out. But I will make sure I have all my ideas, my supplies, everything, so that when that nap time, quiet time hits, I can just get started. And even then, I'm not able to get everything done all in one day. So sometimes you'll see me in different outfits throughout a video. That would indicate that I'm filming on different days. Sometimes I will wear the same outfit day after day for several days just to be able to finish the video, just to give it some consistency, because if I were to change clothes every single time, I would be wearing so many different outfits through the course of one project, it would be ridiculous. So sometimes I'm literally just filming 20 minutes in one day, and I'll have to pick up for another 30 minutes the next day. So I just put the same outfit back on. I try to make my hair look relatively the same just to give it some consistency. So I know that does give the impression of having all this time in one day. So I've really kind of struggled with that, because do I want to give the impression that I have all this time? Because I know it could make other moms feel bad, like, oh, how does she have so much time and I don't? But at the same time, I want to give consistency for the video. So it's kind of a hard balance. Any video editing I do gets done in the evening after the kids are in bed, generally even after my husband is in bed. I end up staying up late, usually at least one night, maybe 2 or 3 nights. Editing a video takes me anywhere from 4 to 6 hours usually. So that all gets done in the evening. If I'm pressed for time, sometimes, I'm gonna come up here. I told you, she has to be in the video. So if I'm pressed for time, sometimes I will arrange with my husband. He'll take the kids to a park Saturday morning or something, and I'll get time to finish up the project or the video or whatever I'm needing to do. But by and large, I'm just piecing it together as I can. And that also means that I try not to set too strict of a deadline for myself, and I often have to push deadlines to the next week because it just didn't work out because of illness or whatever else going on. So that's just par for the course. Let's see. All right, another specific question is, hi, I have a platter that I want to hang. It's 17 inches long and about 12.5 inches high. I'm not sure the one you linked will work. Any suggestions? Let me know, thanks. So I have received this question a few times. Hopefully the microphone isn't picking up her purring too much. She purrs really loudly. So I've received this question a number of times about plate hangers. So the ones that I generally link in my videos are okay for up to a certain size plate, but I often get questions about larger platters and what to use for those. So there are hangers on the market on Amazon that are made for larger platters. So really what you want to do is to measure your platter and also weigh your platter. So if you have a food scale, that would be ideal, or just some sort of scale. She's very much eating this up. So you want to weigh your platter That's very important to make sure it's not too heavy for the hanger. So each hanger is rated according to weight and size. So you just want to make sure it falls within that range. I will link a few of those below, the ones that I use, plus some for larger, heavier platters. When did you start playing the organ? All right, that is a totally different subject. So I'll back up a little bit. I started playing the piano when I was 7, and then I didn't start playing organ until college. And I only did it because I was required to. I actually never really wanted to play the organ. I loved piano. That was my preferred instrument. But I was a church music major, and you were required to have a primary instrument and a secondary instrument. So it would have either been organ or voice, and I wasn't going to do voice. So I picked organ. I kind of struggled through it the first few years of college. And then it wasn't until I was out working full-time in church work that I began to actually love playing the organ. I think because I was playing for services and helping to lead song. It wasn't just all about recitals. It was actually leading hymns, leading congregational singing. So I actually began to really love it. And I still love it. But piano will always still be my favorite. So, what are your favorite thrift shops? Where do you find your great finds? I actually have a highlight in my Instagram profile about local thrift shops. But generally speaking, and I made that highlight several years ago before the price of thrift shops really got out of hand, I feel like. So I have different favorite thrift shops depending on what I'm looking for. Generally, the ones I go to are Goodwill, St. Vincent de Paul, and the Salvation Army Family Thrift Store. So if I'm looking for kids' clothes, I will go to Goodwill because I feel like they are priced the lowest and have the best selection around me generally. If I'm looking for something like furniture, I will go to Salvation Army or St. Vincent de Paul. They generally have the best furniture. I think it really depends on the location. So I put a few thrifting tips in my highlight on Instagram, but I'll just kind of reiterate them here. So the best thing you can do is to go to a bunch of different stores, if you have a variety of stores, in multiple areas around you, and just kind of gauge what generally has the most clothing, the most furniture, what has the most linens, because the more of an item that a store has, the more likely you are to find something decent. You also can kind of gauge the area as far as what kind of donations they receive. Is this an area where they receive very high quality donations, or is it a little bit more, low end? I don't want to say low end, but you know what I mean, like what tends to have the nicer items. So for me personally, I know that St. Vincent de Paul tends to have a lot of vintage and antiques, but sometimes they also know what they have and they price it more like an antique store price, not necessarily a thrift store price. So that's when you also have to be able to whip out your phone and do a quick search, see what that kind of item is going for, and if it's actually a good deal or not. This cat. So generally, I would say Goodwill for clothing, linens, and just the odd thing here and there. St. Vincent de Paul for antiques, vintage, furniture, and then Salvation Army I don't get to as often, but they also have usually a lot of furniture and vintage things. Do you save the seeds so you don't have to buy new ones every year? It is the best. So I will be perfectly honest, my husband is really the gardener here. I enjoy flowers, cut flowers. I enjoy cooking with fresh vegetables and herbs from the garden, but the garden is really his baby. So he's the one to ask about gardening stuff. I doubt that I'll ever get him to come on here, but we'll see. But yes, he has saved some seeds. I don't remember exactly what they were for, but I know he has, my mom has. So yes, we've done that. Another question, recommendations for gluten-free cookie recipes. This might seem very random if you haven't been following along for a while, especially over on Instagram, but I actually went 1 year gluten-free, as well as dairy-free, egg-free, sugar-free, coffee-free. And it was a very difficult year, but it was in an attempt to figure out my health issues, food sensitivities, things like that. So thankfully, since then, I've been able to reintroduce eggs and gluten, coffee, and sugar for the most part. Dairy is still kind of up in the air. I'm still experimenting with what I can handle with that. But as far as gluten-free cookie recipes, I will put 2 of my favorites below. Generally speaking, if I want to make something gluten and dairy-free, I will use King Arthur Measure for Measure gluten-free flour blend, because you can just substitute it 1 for 1 with any cookie recipe. And then to make it dairy-free, if it calls for milk, I will use almond milk or oat milk. If it calls for butter, I will use something like Earth Balance, or I will just substitute an oil like avocado oil, olive oil, something like that. So I will put those gluten-free cookie recipes down below. Very briefly, I wanted to tell you about Poet Dresses. I'm very excited that they sent me one of their dresses to try. I love that it's 100% linen and the lining is 100% cotton. So I just wanted to show it to you really quickly. I love the mission of Poet Dresses because their mission is to create beautiful dresses that are also modest. They have higher necklines, just more coverage in general, while still being so beautiful. This is the hymn dress, and this one actually caught my eye because of its name, Hymns and Home, hymn dress. And of course, it's navy blue. I love blue. Thank you so much to Poet Dresses for sending it to me. You can find the link to it below, and be sure to use my code for a discount on your purchase. Now we're going to move on to some frequently asked questions. So one question I get very often has to do with my rag rug tutorial. And I often get people asking, can I make it a different shape than a circle? The answer is yes. And this is only one way to do a rag rug. I know there are braided varieties. This is just a kind of a crochet method. So in my tutorial, I worked it in the round. I made a round rag rug. And some people have asked, can you make it a rectangle? Can you make it an oval? So if you want to make it a rectangle, instead of working in the round, you would work back and forth in rows. So you would start out by making your chain. So at the very beginning of my tutorial, I show how to make a little chain. In this case, you would make a chain, either the length or the width, whichever way you want, of what you want your rug to be. And then you would just work back and forth, turning at the end of each row. Now, what you need to do, if you know how to crochet, you'll know this, but what you need to do at the end of a row is to make sure to chain one before you turn and work the other way so that you don't lose stitches. So that's how you would make it a rectangle. If you want to make it an oval, instead of spreading your increases evenly around the rug, you would do more increases on 2 sides and fewer increases on the opposite 2 sides, if that makes sense. So it's going to kind of elongate it. Hopefully that's helpful. Another question that I have been receiving recently is if I am expecting again. And the answer is no, I am not. I know that I probably have looked that way in some videos, and honestly, I'm just struggling to lose weight while nursing, and I think that's a very common thing for a lot of women. I do exercise, but in general, it's basically just because I'm still nursing and my body just really wants to hang on to those extra stores to make sure that my very, very young toddler, she's 14 months now, can be well fed. And finally, the number one question I get asked across all platforms, YouTube, Instagram, email, everywhere, is can I help you identify a specific piece of ironstone? And unfortunately, right now, the answer is no, I cannot. I'm sorry. The requests have just become too much, and this is still very much a hobby for me. So I just cannot possibly spend the time identifying all these different pictures. So my purpose in sharing the ironstone video and the quick tutorial on my blog, as well as the resources I have linked, is in hopes that you will be able to develop a sense of what is ironstone, develop some ideas for how to research that using these books, using internet search methods. If an additional tutorial or blog post is of interest, I can try to do that with some other ideas, but unfortunately, I just can't identify the pictures that people are sending me. I get a lot of pictures emailed to me, messaged to me, and at one point, I had said that I would be happy to do that right when I put out that blog post and YouTube video. But then all of them started pouring in, and I just can't possibly do that anymore. So please just know, if you send me pictures, I'm sorry, I can't help you right now. It's as much as I can do just to get the occasional video out. So, however, I will link my favorite materials down below. Hopefully that'll be helpful. I'll link my video and my blog post again, just in case you need those too. I think that was it for the questions this time, but I would be happy to do this again in the future if you have additional questions or you just are curious about whatever. So feel free to drop a comment below if you have more questions, and I should have a relatively normal video next time for you. Be sure to hit the subscribe button for more cottage living, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.